There's so much that has happened in the local scene, but we'll be focusing on the issue of the US, Iran, and Israel war, which is what is the global or international community doing in response to the same? And that's why I am privileged to be hosting the one and only Mr. Sitati Wasilwa, who is a political risk analyst, and he's told me I've been very busy trying to look at the trends and everything that is happening, and therefore very privileged to have you, sir. Good evening. How are you doing? Welcome.
Thanks, Eli, for having me once again to be able to have this, discussion. Hopefully, it's going to be a fruitful one, a positive one. But of course, the most important thing is for us to understand its context, and not just for where the United States or Israel or Iran or the Middle East stand, but I think it'll also be important to reflect on what does it mean for Africa anyway. You know.
I mean, I am very intrigued in terms of just how this conversation will go, Sitati, especially since we have seen a lot of the global players coming into response. If you paid attention, which I know you did, we saw President of France, Emmanuel Macron, taking a different stand and of course calling out the Trump administration and the US at large for violating international community laws and orders. We saw the other day Samakir from the UK in the House of Commons, I believe so, also addressing them and saying the United Kingdom will not be taking part and parcel of this escalation, and they will continue monitoring how the event occurs, and possibly if need be they'll have appropriate conversation when time comes. Very quickly you cross over to Spain, and the Spaniards have been put on the watch by the world prefect, being told if you refuse for us to use your bases, rather our bases in your country, we can come in as we want and move out as we want. We do not need your permission. And the Spanish have said, we are not having that conversation. So when the Cyprus community was asking for a retaliation from the EU community, many would have thought probably the European Union at large will definitely take a step or calculated moves. Maybe, Sitati, to start from that point of view, what exactly is at play right here?
Well, you see, all these reactions that we are witnessing from countries which have been allies of the United States or Israel for quite a long time, they simply indicate the fact that they are jittery about engaging in a war which they may not really understand what is it, or they do not really understand what the interests of the United States, perhaps, and Israel in this war. And if you remember the words of the Prime Minister of Britain, Keir Starmer, he said that the lessons which Britain learned from the invasion of Iraq in 2003 are still fresh as far as the involvement of Britain in this whole debacle is concerned. So I think it has everything to do with the approach in which the Trump administration has been having towards its allies. Remember from his the kind of ruckus that he created towards NATO states in his first term, calling for NATO countries to increase their budgetary contributions to that particular alliance, and then even later on other issues. I mean, we saw even earlier this year, the Trump administration getting jittery with the European Union and other countries regarding the Greenland island. So all these issues in context create a picture that all may not be really rosy in terms of how Washington under President Donald Trump relates to these allies, especially when you consider some historical facts which are quite disturbing. But all said and done, you don't really expect all these reactions to be extremely weighty in preventing the United States and Israel, to go on, especially and Bibi Netanyahu, to
Yeah.
go on with what they consider to be the critical objectives in Iran, which, as far as I am concerned, have everything to do with intending to carry out a regime change in Iran, and second of all, to impose, an administration, a puppet administration that would enable Israel to be, to consider the Middle East its holistic sphere of influence.
You know, you talk about the regime change, which is something that a lot of us, of course, were looking at in terms of the possibilities of the US having a puppet installed leader in Iran. They have also talked about liberating the people of Iran. Now, these two things to me quite some I mean sound contradictory if you were to look at them objectively, but then in the world of politics, it is one goal at the end of it. Look at what happened in Venezuela, for example, and President Trump has come out to defend the US actions in Venezuela. And when the son of the then president, rather the supreme leader, who was taken out by the US, was seen as the next possible replacement as the supreme leader, Trump came out almost throwing tantrums and saying it cannot be because I was never involved. I need to be involved if he's the perfect match. I mean, who is Trump, Israel, and any other ally that wants to go into this war trying to save?
Uh, well, I think Trump and Netanyahu, they have their own interests in Iran because they know that once they have perhaps decapitated Iran totally in terms of its power, and then its axis of resistance, which is across in Lebanon through Hezbollah, in Iraq through the Islamic resistance in Iraq, those smaller groups that are pro-Iran, for example, Kataib Hezbollah in Iraq, and even the Houthis in Yemen, who are yet to, who are voicing support for Iran, but they are yet to launch attacks against perhaps the interests of America or Israel. So it's up to Israel and Netanyahu in this case, and Trump. I mean, seeking to impose Israel as perhaps the most powerful state, dominant state in the Middle East, which I also think, as you have mentioned in some of your statements, it will be interesting to watch out. Look, history is very important in this case. I think the case of Iran could turn out to be a little bit much more complex than perhaps what many people are expecting, especially from the perspective of the Trump administration and that one of Bibi Netanyahu.
Yeah.
Because Iran is one complex country. It's it's one, on one side, I think it's important to acknowledge the fact that there have been and there still are anti-government sentiments against the Iranian regime. We have seen that through mass protests in that particular country. But I also think is a little bit naive to rule out the kind of support that significant support that is still given to the Iranian regime. I mean, look, if the Trump administration and Israel go ahead, for example, to try and execute a regime change, in this case, we have seen reports and even we have seen statements by Trump himself, you know, urging the Kurdish fighters in Iraq and the western part of Iran to and try to fight against the Iranian regime. But I think it's also important to acknowledge the fact that the Kurdish population is only 10% of the Iranian population, which is around made up of 90 million people. So that can create a perception that the Iranian people, especially when you look at the majority the ethnic communities there, they would consider that no, we cannot have the Kurdish people coming in and wanting to rule us,
Yeah.
So these kind of issues are likely to only heighten some nationalistic sentiments against the external forces in the name of the United States
Yeah.
and Israel. And I think regime change is not going to be as easy as some quarters are trying to label it. And also remember that geography plays a very critical role when it comes to armed conflict. And
Yeah.
I think the terrain in the western part of Iran is a little bit challenging. And I don't really think that's an issue that the Western forces, if deployments we are going to have maybe boots on the ground deployment of armed forces. It's never going to be easy, and Iran shouldn't be assumed to be like, let's say, Afghanistan. But even in Afghanistan, I mean, how long did the war take? Close to 20 years. In other countries, I mean, conflict. And even in Iraq, it took a very long time before at least we had some semblance of the conflict, appearing to have died down. So it's a very complex affair if indeed these forces are going to attempt to pursue regime change in Iran.
You say it's a complex affair, and I totally agree and see where you're coming from. The only thing that I'm a bit concerned, it's the fact that right now we are no longer discussing the issue of what I will call or equate to having actual soldiers or boots on the ground. Of course, there are deployments from different sectors, would we say friendly countries, and most of these have been drone operations. Most of these have been missile being sent from whatever complex that this in quote US and Israel are operating. If you were to talk about the complex aspect of the economic impact this will have, both from the countries that are involved and the countries that are being and the country that is being targeted, what are the scenarios that will come into play, Sitati?
Well, I think one interesting observation and trend as far as this conflict is concerned is that Iran is deploying or rather using cheaper drones, and on the other side, the United States and Israel are using missiles and even other related air defensive and offensive technologies, which are much more expensive. So in that case, and I think even the Iranians are not really naive and they are not stupid. I mean, they were anticipating these kind of situations to happen for a very long time, especially in the wake of some of the two major wars that we've seen in the Middle East in the last over the last 2 or 3 years or 2.5. I mean, the Israel Hamas war, the Israel Hezbollah war. So that's something Iranians have been preparing for. But now, in terms of the implications, definitely with some of the key or some of the critical shipping lanes, the Strait of Hormuz, for example, I mean, it's technically closed as we speak, I mean, due to these heightened tensions. So what does that mean? Oil prices in other parts, in most parts of the world, are going to shoot up. And I can bet for a fact that it will even turn to be more chaotic.
Yeah.
The Red Sea are going to launch attacks. So it's not good news, not just for countries in Asia or European countries like we've seen. I mean, even in Europe, gas prices have shot up. I mean, we also so it appears as if Russia is going to be a very big beneficiary in this war.
You're talking about Russia, and sorry if I'm cutting you short, but you're talking about Russia. If you paid attention, the European Union was also asking Ukraine to allow the Russian gas pipe to actually be opened so that they can have a free way of this very important commodity into the EU. And that's why I'm thinking,
Yeah.
I don't know, has Russia actually responded or said a thing about the whole issue? I think that one will help me formulate my next question.
I mean, look, it's interesting that Russia is emerging as a very big beneficiary out of this conflict, and
Mm.
I think Ukraine is a little bit afraid. I think the Ukrainian perspective here is that Ukraine is a little bit jittery. You know why? Um, India has already. I mean, the United States has already permitted India to at least to start buying Russian oil. The European Union, I think the member states were to meet 2 days ago to discuss or look into the possibilities of trying to, get oil via. I think you're referring to the Druzhba pipeline,
Mm-hmm.
which maintains that it is damaged or it was damaged in January this year from Russian attacks. But Hungary and Slovakia in particular are not really convinced with the arguments given by or the explanations given by the Ukraine.
Yeah.
But at the end of it all, even when you look at the volume of the liquefied natural gas and even oil that comes from the Middle Eastern countries, I mean, look at Qatar. A whole lot of its exports of oil and gas have been of this conflict.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, even the state itself, the major energy companies have told the Donald Trump administration that look, if this conflict is going to persist, the U.S. oil shale reserves are not particularly enough to keep the country going.
Yeah.
So it is going to be a rupture, and I think we all understand what comes with high oil prices. I mean, everything literally will be driven up. So we are staring at a very magnanimous economic slump if this particular conflict is going to last for a very long time. And not only the part of the world, and I repeat again, Africa tangled in this. We are safe.
Sitate, one of the biggest arguments that has been moving around is the fact that um, this is a war that America cannot claim to be very ready for, irrespective of the chest thumping that is happening. For example, not anyone's economy is doing good as we speak right now. We have also been told about the issue of Ukraine being requested to allow the Russian gas to go through. And this in itself actually now makes the statements of the French president make a little bit of sense. It is not really about his love for Iran. I mean, I'm making up that. I don't know if my conclusions are wrong. You can help me out. Because if right now the EU is struggling, literally struggling, um, the pipe or the gas or the crude oil that was coming from Iran was very important to their market. Now, America has a bigger control of the Venezuelan asset. And if they're going to have more control on the Iranian asset, which is now in this case the oil, then where does that leave EU? The only dependent they have, most probably, is the other guy. And to me, it is not really about the love for the Iranians. It is about the desperate point the European Union finds itself in. I don't know if you share the same sentiments.
Yeah, look, Yanni, fundamentally, I share the same sense as yours. Because, look, at the end of the day, I mean, politics, whether it's local or regional or global, it's all about the interests. I mean, are you meeting my interests in as much as I intend to meet yours? That's basically what politics is about. Um, when you look at how this conflict is panning out, in my opinion, I think what could make this conflict not last longer would be the economic pressures that will come from it and the geostrategic interests and the geopolitical whatever scheming and interests tied in all this grand scheme of issues. I mean, it's a complex affair, as I mentioned it, because um, if this conflict persists, then definitely the European Union has no option but to get back to Russia and tell them, hey, we need this gas and oil from you. That is, I mean, pretty much expected to happen if this conflict persists. And also, as I've mentioned, I mean, if you take into context some of the analysis and statements from these leading, Middle Eastern uh, energy companies. I mean, Aramco, whatever, Qatari energy companies. I mean, they have already stated that in the next 3 weeks, if this war is going to continue, 3 weeks or 25 days, whatever that is, then it's going to be an economic rupture that is before not just the region, but the entire world. So it's for Europe now considering to go back to, depending on Russian gas and oil. And remember, the European Union
Yeah.
has been having the intentions, at least, to wean itself of
Yeah.
dependence on Russian oil and gas. And I think they've been trying to escalate those plans.
Yeah.
I think they're planning to do it at least to cut off dependency from Russian oil and gas by 2027.
Hmm.
Uh, this particular conflict has now thrown in another hook in the game. Whether that is going to happen by 2027
Yeah.
is another affair. So, there are so many things that are now tied to the conflict in the Middle East.
A lot of moving targets, and that's why tonight you're looking at your weekend brief, looking and trying to understand what the US, Iranian, and Israel conflict and escalation means, not just to you, but to the entire global village. Now, Sitati is here with us, and Sitati Wasilwa is a political risk analyst. Happy to have you as always, Sitati. You've promised us a 3/4 of your hour. I don't know if we'll be able to manage through all the questions, but I'll make sure that I pedal up and step on that gas until we are able to get everything from you. Now, I want to look at some of the implications that will come. I'm trying to understand Bibi Netanyahu's agenda in all this. And in all honesty, I know there has been a lot in terms of the Middle East countries and what Netanyahu wants to do with that region. In this specific war, I'm a bit blank. What do you know from where you sit?
Well, look, I think as far as Netanyahu is concerned, it's pretty much direct. I mean, what he wants to get out of Iran.
Yeah.
Netanyahu is one particular politician who's been obsessed with Iran for far too long. When you trace back his speeches, believe me, to the 1980s, 1990s, even way before he became prime minister, he's always been obsessed about taking out on Iran, fighting Iran, trying to dislodge it and position Israel as the region's, power supremo. And I think in a very big way, you can say that the war with Iran, the current war against Iran, is not really surprising. I mean, look, in October 2023, we had the war between Israel and Hamas breaking out. We had so many attempts at a ceasefire. And then it only occurred until last year, sometime towards the end of last year, was it in October? Almost 2 years since the war commenced when a ceasefire was reached. But again, Israel has repeatedly, breached that particular ceasefire agreement. Look at the war between Israel and Hezbollah, which also broke out at almost the same time back in October 2023. It, lingered on for quite some time, close to perhaps a year or so. A ceasefire was reached, but the ceasefire, Israel has repeatedly breached that particular ceasefire. And then last year in June, we had, a war involving Iran. America to some extent, and Israel, which lasted for 12 days. The so-called now, it's infamously referred to as the 12-day war. So this is a scheme planned by Bibi Netanyahu, in particular, to position Israel as the region's superpower. And I think he draws much of his, fantasy from what the United States has been doing for decades in
Yeah.
the so-called Western Hemisphere, in those parts that are near the United States, Latin America, whatever, Central America.
Yeah.
So he's technically positioned Israel to be the dominant power in the Middle East. And if is he going to achieve that? I mean, with Iran, I mean, you don't underestimate Iran. Iran certainly, despite Israel's advanced, weaponry technology, I
Hmm.
think you also have to give it to the Iranians for the fact that they are likely to go as far as Israel wants
Yeah.
in this particular war.
So, Sitate, again, I'm just trying to be able to piece together all this stuff, including the involvement. The Middle East, again, find itself in a very precarious condition. And I'm talking about now the other neighbors. Qatar found themselves almost closing their entire airspace. So is Dubai, the Emirates, I have to mention that. And now there are, of course, some what we will call in another language, humanitarian flights or safe paths being opened to allow some, transfer of commodities and persons that it's needed. But what is the biggest catastrophe if this escalation continues past 1 year? Because when Russia and Ukraine happened, some people are hallucinating, thinking it's going to be, a couple of months, weeks, and here we are, big man mess. What do you see?
Well, as you mentioned, I think, and it's good you brought that question because I think sometimes when we get we analyze these conflicts or try to uh, dish out opinions on what is likely to happen, it's always very to try to make proclamations, especially precision, what could we call them, predictions.
Yeah.
You can't really precisely predict when wars
Yeah.
are going to end.
Yeah.
That's something which is dangerous even for any other analyst to consider doing.
Mm.
What we can only do is to try and come up with maybe the likely scenarios or look at the indicators which can give us different pathways on which or how things could turn out to be.
Yeah.
And it may not be surprising. You mentioned 1 year. But just to back up what you've stated, look,
Yeah.
there was a certain report, I think, which surfaced from Washington, uh, tied to the Trump administration's objectives as far as the conflict in Iran is concerned.
Mm.
It clearly states that they are preparing for a war that can last up to September this year. So we are in the month of March.
Yeah.
September is 6 months away. So a stretch of 6 months, anything can happen beyond that. I mean,
Mm.
and you brought up the Russia-Ukraine war, but even think of the war in Sudan.
Yeah.
How many years are we talking about? Is it four? I mean, so most of these wars, I mean, it's a little bit tricky to predict when they're going to end. But now, apart from the fact that the Trump administration perhaps is approximating that they are looking at, and Israel to a war that can go up to at least September.
Hmm.
But I think, the nature of this war is not as that of maybe Russia and Ukraine.
Yeah.
When you look at the geographical elements of it and even the economic elements of it. I mean, how many countries dependent on the oil or gas or even the cereals and generally other grain products and fertilizer from Russia and Ukraine, compared to the number of countries that depend on the millet on for supplies of oil and gas. I mean, you look at the numbers; it's crazy. Now, look at critical maritime routes, the so-called shipping lanes that are around the Middle East. The Strait of Hormuz, I mean, it's massive. You look at other shipping lanes tied to it, the Red Sea, you know. So compare that with the critical shipping lanes that perhaps link Europe with Russia. And then you get a picture that the economic pressures that are, resulting from this war, perhaps the only thing that is going to make this war to last for a short period of time. And I think maybe we are going to see pressure from the allies, United States and Israel, and even Iran, trying to push things come to a halt. Because if this is going to last for a year, I can tell you without any fear of contradiction that we are staring at a very, very bad economic crisis, perhaps one of the greatest yet to be seen in the world for many, many years.
All right. Now you know what could be the possible play out in all this issue that we are in. Some of us are finding ourselves analyzing more than just living the reality of what is happening in the Middle East. And evidently, it is not going anywhere anytime soon. I heard, I think to some extent, Mr. T finds himself almost making a joke of his own joke when he was talking about he was surprised on the response from the Iranians. Taking out the top brass of the military, the Secretary of State, taking out the head of the state, and then you are still surprised that these people are actually still operational. Is this miscalculated risk or too much boastfulness? What is at play here, really?
Yeah, you see, it is a typical or classic characteristic and example of what we can call American arrogance and ignorance to a very large extent. And when you mention America, of course, you can't, uh, do away with one. I mean, they go together. Now, I think from a historical perspective, you see, Iran is not Afghanistan. You remember when the United States went into Afghanistan? Certainly, Iran is not Afghanistan. Iran is not Libya. You remember that time when the United States and other NATO allies or whatever NATO member states, whatever they did in Libya, 2011-12. I mean, before that, they lied to Gaddafi basically that you see what, Mr. Muammar Gaddafi, don't try to build a military industrial complex, a powerful one, that they care for him. And certainly, Iran is not Iraq. Iran is Iraq. And I think the Iranians, as I mentioned before, are not. These are the kind of situations, scenarios that they have for far too long anticipated to take place. And when you look at the political structure of the Iranian regime, I mean, how it is structured and even the military, it's much more complex, and it gives room. It is designed in a way that succession is not really a very, very big issue. So you cut one tail of a lizard, then you are rest assured that another one is going to grow. And now the danger, in fact, here is that the fact that they've taken these guys out, you're going even maybe to have much more radical fellows coming into power in Iran. And I think that's something maybe they, especially the Trump administration or even Israel's Netanyahu's Israel, never really anticipated. They just thought maybe we would take Khamenei off the radar. You're going to take as for military leaders and other political leaders, then we are going to march into Tehran. It's not as easy as they think. And I think Tehran or Iran is pretty much prepared to put up a very strong fight as far as this issue is concerned, from my perspective.
Now, are you a fan of football?
Very big, a very big one.
Good. That's interesting because there's a point in any football game or any other sports game, you know you are actually losing the game. As a sportsman, what do you do? Do you tap out or you continue playing until you hear the first? Because you know there's the sportsman and then there is the fun.
Well, you see, it all depends with the stakes at play.
Mm,
You know, if the prize is too big to not lose,
mm,
then you're definitely going to, engage in the game, wanting to push it to the end and not wanting to lose.
mm.
But if you're taking a beating, then you're going to say, "Oh man, I've taken the beating and I'm now giving up." Now, talking about, I think, um, all these situations and scenarios in relation to the conflict and even football. I mean, look, the Trump administration is trying to play some cheeky cards here because it is pretty much saying that the Iranians are now much more willing to come to the table and negotiate. But you see, the Iranians, I think they are pretty much prepared. And this time, I don't think they'll be extremely foolish to go to negotiating table
Yeah,
and then you know make some concessions only to be again blowed up in the
yeah,
middle of the discussion. So when they're about to reach a very practical conclusion.
yeah,
So looking at the stakes in this fight, on one hand, we must, and the Westerners, especially Washington, West, must generally accept that, you see, if this war protracts,
mm,
do they have sufficient munitions to continue fighting in this war? Because the matter of fact is this: the United States has so many commitments, and I think looking at the war in between Russia and Ukraine, and even in Gaza, think of how many weapons the
yeah.
United States has shipped to those parts of the world. So does it have enough stockpiles to take on Iran? And I think Iran is pretty much prepared. I mean, honestly, with stock of relatively cheaper weapons,
Mm,
which I think can get them as far as they want to go. So it's an additional kind of an engagement, how I look at it.
yeah,
But of course, you don't underestimate the fact that the likes of America, I mean, it has a massive military industrial complex,
yeah.
which I think can also produce weapons quite fast. But now, how they're going to sustain this and other wars in the world, that is the bigger or the biggest elephant in the room for us.
Now, you talk about the issue of sustaining this war and sustaining the aspect of the elephant, which in this case is the weaponry and the industrial complex that comes with the machine war or the war machine. Why I asked you about the issue of sports, it's because interestingly, the Americas will be hosting the 2026 June FIFA World Cup.
Well, mm,
And this begins on the 11th of June. Now, did you know when this kicks off, Iran is also part of the participants in this interesting FIFA 2026, and they'll be taking on New Zealand in Group G on the 16th of June. Now, why I'm asking these not so connected connections of conversation, it's because you go to a country, take out the military, and that's what they are bragging of doing. But then you are expecting these people to come and participate in a match that is say and this and that, and let's keep war, let's keep peace, and whatever it is they want to call it. I don't know what's the theme for this year 2026. my point here is, Sitati, I am thinking this was the worst time to actually take that escalation. And out of those who will be flying into the US, if this FIFA will happen, because my personal opinion, if you ask me, Sitati, is this is the time FIFA will actually say we are not having 2026 World Cup until we settle down and we actually practice what we preach. But I digress. If we are going to look at sports, we are going to look at the participation, we are going to look at the issue of bringing the world together under one celebration. Was this a technically smart move with all that comes with 2026 World Cup FIFA? Technically, what do you think? Compile the sports.
Look, sporting events, sports, if you look at sports geopolitically or from a geopolitical perspective, sports is certainly a very, very weighty geopolitical affair.
Yeah.
That's why countries, they compete to host these big sporting events, whether it's Olympics, whether it's the World Cup for different sporting disciplines, be it football, be it hockey, volleyball, these sporting events or disciplines that you can talk about. I have one very interesting book in my small library here, which focuses on how football, explains the world, and it gives so many correlations between football and different world events, which I think is pretty much important. But in this case, will FIFA have the balls to come out strongly and say, okay, hey, we cannot have a a regional or an almost global like conflict going on.
Yeah.
To have the United States go ahead and host the event.
Yeah.
I think, in my view, FIFA, the way it operates, depends with, or if you want to understand how it operates, then you look at who contributes the largest amount of money to finance its operations. Technically, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And to go back a little bit, if Russia was barred by, the likes of FIFA, the likes of UEFA, so for the Olympics, from participating in its events, and Israel continued participating, you can see this kind of, inequalities that we are talking about. So I am highly skeptical as to whether FIFA will be bold enough and say, look, Mr. Trump and your country, the United States, you're not going to host this.
Yeah.
It is going to be very difficult. And in Washington, a number of strong groups will go to whatever extent to ensure that such kind of events are hosted by the United States. And don't forget the kind of times that and some dramatic episodes that we witnessed, the head of FIFA, the FIFA president, basically, trying to say, praising Trump, his role for peace, blah, 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 which I don't really think made a lot of sense. So, in my view, I don't see a way in which, unless the conflict is going to blow up, in a very big way, to the extent that flying then becomes very difficult. Basically, World War III. We may not really reach there, but I think those are the kind of maybe situations or scenarios that could now bring into focus or pile a lot of pressure maybe on all the parties concerned to call for the cancellation of the World Cup. But how I look at it, I think the world has never been fair enough, and the world has always favored the powerful. And I'm convinced that the United States will still host the World Cup.
I mean, my question is not really on the hosting. They can. My question is, and I know we are really running out of time, is it time for the rest who feel this is not working for us to actually say we boycott until America decides they're going to behave? Is it possible to punish the bully in this case, looking at America?
Yeah, it's pretty much possible. It all depends with how these countries, the coalition of the willing, if to emerge
Mm.
and they take a very strong position and say, let's not participate in this World Cup because of the atrocities
Yeah.
committed by the United States, not just in Iran, but I mean in other parts of the world, in even closer to the United States in Venezuela.
Mm.
So, but now the danger is, or the challenge rather, is how many countries will be willing to take that particular big step and say, let's not participate in this World Cup. I'm very sure FIFA will say, okay, we should not mix politics with sports,
Oh, really?
which is highly
And, and the way
and
politics and football, for that matter, is very political. You know what? Let's do a head count very quickly. It doesn't have to be accurate, but let's do a head count in terms of the possibilities. Assuming today we will say we are boycotting. I'll start with the first group. This is Group A. We have Mexico, South Africa. We know South Africa has had a very hard stance against the Israeli regime because of the Palestinian escalations and what have you. If they were to take a vote on boycotting, what are the chances? Would you give
those
them
two
a
teams will
yellow?
need to
Would you
rest.
give them a green? Would you give them a red?
Well, the two countries will go to the World Cup because of the public, the sentiments of the public. The public will say, no, we want to watch football.
No, I'm saying if today we would say we want to boycott between these two countries, which one will give a green, a yellow, or a red? Yellow being, well, most likely, a green it's definitely, and a red it's we're not in.
Well, for South Africa, perhaps yellow,
All right.
given the fact that, yep.
South Korea, of course, still not tabled out, but we have Canada most likely. What has been the stance of Canada on
Well,
these matters?
Canada, I mean, going back to this, these things are very intricate, and
Exactly.
just allow me to explanation.
Yeah.
You know, when, when you revisit the speech by the Prime Minister of Canada at the World Economic Forum in January in Davos,
Davos, yeah.
Switzerland, I think that is going to go down as one of the most consequential speeches in this fast-changing geopolitical times. How Trump has been bullying basically Canada with the tariffs and issues related. So I don't really think Canada. I mean, the Canadians would say, okay, if it is Trump, then why not less? We can boycott.
All right. I see. Of course, there's Qatar, Switzerland. Possibly Qatar will want to prove their worth and head to the World Cup. Is that your thought too?
I mean, Qatar is a strong ally of the United States. Remember that it should be the best military base in the Middle East. It should be based in Qatar, if I'm so. And basically, if last year you remember when Donald Trump had his visit in the Middle East, I think Qatar is one of those countries which signed some lucrative deals with Trump. So the Qataris would definitely march into the United States, and if you guys are not willing to show up, I think they are going to get to the final and maybe have.
That will be a smooth ride into, and I'm afraid I keep losing you, Sitari. I don't know if people are now trying to ask you for dinner. It's about that time people went for dinner. As we conclude, because your time is out, sir, the rest of the world is watching. what is happening in Middle East. The rest of the world is, seated on the edge of their seats, trying to follow every single day and hoping for a reversed decision. If you were to advise President T on his move, would you ask him to pull the plug on this war?
Yeah, definitely that would be the safest thing to do and the most pragmatic at this stage. Because, I mean, this conflict that have some already having some serious global, ramifications. I mean, in terms of the economic impact. So that only means that if it persists for weeks or months on the, on the worst case basis, then we are going to have some serious capitulations around the world. So that would be the most, uh, ideal thing to do. But it's ideal. You also remember that these wars are initiated by men who have very big egos and they never want to take defeat. And I think also you have all these wars prolonging for long periods. I mean, so egos also come into play. But the safest thing to do, pull the plug, end the war. If the United States want to negotiate with Iran, they have to be straightforward. What is Iran's position? And you remember just before the chaos broke out last Saturday, on the 28th of February. I mean, Oman surprisingly was mediating in the conflict, and I think the progress was very, very decent by the United States and Iran. And so it was not about nuclear change. It was all about America being entangled into Israel's interests, especially Netanyahu's, and trying to occasion a regime change and perhaps to position Israel as the most dominant power in the Middle East.
Interesting, and thank you very much, Sitati. I see Western is also on standby on the other end of the line. Probably I'll just allow you a minute or so to make your final remarks, if any, and then I'm going to cross over to you, Western. Yes, Sitati?
Yeah, look, Lukiani, thank you very much for having me. And my closing remarks are this. Let's also think about the position of Africa in this conflict. Let's think of, the threats that could arise, let's say, in the Red Sea, the countries that border the Red Sea, African countries which depend on these critical shipping lanes of maritime routes along the Red Sea, very critical. But the most important of all is this. African countries must remember to fast track trading with each other. If we have oil reserves in African countries, why haven't we not been scaling up all this, if it is oil, if it is gas, or any other product? So these conflicts that break out in other parts of the world remind us as Africans that we need to pull up our socks. But how is that going to happen? I mean, we are fond of taking the back seat. So maybe that's who we are.
Thank you very much, Sitati Wasilwa. Sitati is a political analyst, and that is political risk analyst, and he has a keen eye on the geopolitics and, of course, how governments work and function. It's been a pleasure having you, sir. Until the next set, have yourself a great evening as we cross over to Western, who is also on standby. And Western, thank you very much for joining us on the X-Space line. How are you doing? We have really focused on how the big boys, if I want to call them that, have been behaving the past week. What do you have to tell us, Western? And karibu sana.
Eli, no, I'm not doing well because these things that are happening, effectively crimes against humanity, shouldn't be happening in this day and age. But here we are. So it means the narratives that we hear a lot about human rights, democracy, rule of law, constitutionalism, they're very fake narratives, extremely hollow. Because the merchants of those narratives don't believe in what they say at all. So, well, the rest of the world is hurting, and it's just the beginning. It can only get worse. It can only get worse for all of us. For there will be no winner here. You can only have losers. And those who will pay the most price are usually those at the end of the food chain, because this is a jungle, the law of the jungle. So if you are at the tail end of the food chain, you're going to pay the supreme price. And I'm talking about Africa and Kenya and many other such countries. They will be hard hit. So I'm not well, but that is what it is. Before you ask whatever you want to ask, look, Eli, Mark Carney is a textbook study in the duplicity of Western politicians. Honestly, he doesn't deserve any praise, because at Davos, he decried what he called, and this is a very nebulous phrase, a rules-based international order that no longer works, and who is responsible? Donald Trump completely upended the world as it was known by the likes of Mark Carney before Trump arrived. But before Trump arrived, the world that existed was hostile to the other, to the periphery, to the so-called third world countries, if you like, or the developing world. Those on the margins, it didn't work for them. And the likes of Mark Carney didn't bother because it worked for them. It worked for them. So they are shocked that the disruption is not sparing them. Hence, they purport to be interested in a rules-based international order. Where was Mark Carney when Iraq was invaded in 2003? Where was he? Where was he when Afghanistan was invaded? Where was he when Libya was invaded? Where was he? That he is telling us now in Davos. But he has changed, because now he's supporting Netanyahu, the genocide, supporting Trump, one who's committing mass atrocities in Iran. So what has he changed? What has changed with him? Nothing has changed. No, he's not exemplary. He's like the rest of them. Let's pay attention to these people. Not what they say, what they do. That's what is important. For us, we pay attention to what they say. What they say is not important. It's what they do that is important. So Mark Carney is like Donald Trump, but he's polished. It's polished. You know, all of them. They're just like Trump. Trump is coarse. He's abrasive. He has no room for diplomatic niceties. He's gung-ho. He's small-minded. With them, they consider themselves suave, that they can commit the kind of atrocities Trump is committing, but in a suave manner. But what is that? How can you kill people in a suave manner? So that's what I wish to say. And then with this war, it's yet again America's greatest strategic disaster. It's a disaster because they will not win this war. Because I can ask you, what would constitute victory in such a war? What would constitute victory? What would it be? There cannot be anything called victory in this war. Nothing. And Iran does not have to win this war because they're militarily inferior to the US. So that's a no-brainer. So they can't win it, and they don't have to win it. What they have to do is to elongate this war for as long as it takes, and to ensure that the US does not win the war. And they can ensure that. We just make the Americans get bogged down in that war for as long as it takes. Then you and me will start feeling the pain when the cost of living starts skyrocketing. We will start feeling the pain, all of us, because of shortage of energy and a whole host of things. The American society population will start feeling the pain, the political backlash, the pressure domestically in the US. That's what it is. Why are you not winning this war? Why is it costing us so much? Where is our money going? Why is the cost of living so high? So it's a war that will be about politics, not guns, not missiles. It will be about politics. It will be about geography. How well do you understand the Iranian topography? How well do you understand it? For that's what Americans could not surmount when they went to Afghanistan. No, the Taliban's, how sophisticated are they militarily? Talibans. No, but Americans could not defeat them outright. For 20 years, they're just to pack up and go. 20 years. With all the firepower, all the money, all the sophistication, they could not outrightly neutralize the Talibans. Talibans are back in power. So they're not going to neutralize the Iranian elite regime. That's not going to work. But there'll be an aftermath in for all of us. Cyber attacks will be there. Supply chains, as you may have heard before, will be severely interfered with, because that Strait of Hormuz, 20% of oil supply goes through that sea route. You look at the way Iran has done now. The ripple effect is massive. It runs into billions of US dollars. You can be sure. And those are economies that will tank, go belly up. So no one is a bystander in this war. Nobody. If you hear somebody telling you, whether it's in East Asia, whether it's in Africa, whether it's in Europe, wherever, Oceania, that has nothing to do with me. That's an ignoramus. No one can be a bystander in this war. No one. We are all participants in this war. From an economic front, specifically, it will be a war of time, as I said. Just play on time. As Iran, play on time. Just stretch them. It's like in football. You were talking about football. The other team is stronger. Just pack the bars so that you don't concede a goal. Just stretch them. That is it. It can be a tactic in football. And then you say, okay, we will go to a post-match penalties. There it is anybody's game. But we're not going to concede any goal. So pack the bars. Everybody go to the defense. That is it. It's a tactic. So this is not a war about America's superior military firepower. It's not. This is a war about ideology, a war about economics, a war about geography. It's about time. It's about politics. It's about America's domestic politics and the reaction thereafter, once they realize that, look, this is a hellhole that Donald Trump has sunk us in. Democracy. America is weak, is fighting from a weak position because they purport to be a democracy. And therefore, you saw when the Congress, was it yesterday or the other day, they debated the matter. Well, Trump prevailed because he has got a commanding lead, the Congress. But that is the first reaction domestically. First, as the days go, discontent, disgruntlement can only rise. So in a democracy, people can say, we want a say. We want to have a say as to whether this war is justified or not. The Iranians don't have to worry about that. It's an authoritarian state. So the Iranians will rally behind their elite. Americans are disillusioned. They're not going to rise against their elite. In fact, they'll be emboldened and rally behind their elite. They will not call for this war to end. In fact, they will insist that they fight to the bitter end. On the other hand, in the US, the call for American troops to go home can only increase, especially if body bags, continue arriving on the American shores. They will demand that, come on, what's happening here? So this war will go the Vietnam War, the Afghanistan War, the war in Iraq. It will take that route. It will take that route. Nothing will change. America will not prevail. That's my take, Eli, unless you've got some other question.
I hear you. That is Western. And of course, from the aspect of the issues we keep talking about, protecting human rights, defending human rights, I mean, it sinks a big hole into what we call democracies and what they're supposed to practice. It sinks a big hole to what we believe should be the rule of law and the international, what I will say, code of ethics when it comes to how countries operate with one another. I want us to a little bit focus on the African continent and its response to this specific. I don't know if there have been any strong countries that have come out to either, of course, statements are political, but taking a stand in what they want to see or not to see in this escalation. But before I do that, allow me to also cue you, Marabu. If you can hear us, you've been dropping off the mic. Kindly just give me a sign you're there, sir. Marabu? All right, I see you 100%.
Am I coming through?
Yes, you are. You are. Do you want to make your submission right now, or should I proceed fast with Western?
Proceed with Western, please.
All right, thank you very much. And again, ladies and gentlemen, we are into 12 minutes after the hour. We are discussing the global response on the US, Iran, and Israel war. As it is, there have been different responses from different quarters, specifically from the European Union. We've seen a lot of activities on the news televisions. I don't know how truthful these are, but I'd like to pick your mind, Western, in the same conversation, specifically now looking at other players from the global community. Western, what has been your observation so far, except the European Union and what we'll call the big boys club?
Well, I'll be more interested in what the African position is, because if you go to Latin America, there are regimes there, like in Colombia, very much against the US and its imperialism. Of course, the US has got allies in Latin America, but most of those regimes in Latin America are leftist, and therefore, ideologically, they don't agree with the US. It's Africa I'm more interested in. No, there will be no joint position by Africa on this conflict. There will be none. Because there was none when Donald Trump imposed tariffs on every other person. The AU, I think, is one region that was deafening in their silence. They had no position on those tariffs. Unlike other regional bodies, they didn't explain how they will go about it. They didn't explain what they would do following Trump's dissolution of the United States agency, USAID, HIV, public health. They did not have a position on that. They left the matter like that to date. So they will not have a position on this war. Why? Because most of them are differential to the US. They're differential to the US. They are vassal states. Vassal states. When you're a vassal state, no, you don't have what it takes to look your master in the eye and tell him your mind. If at all you've got your mind, because often you don't have any mind of your own. But the exception is Pretoria.
Yeah.
Pretoria is the exception. Pretoria took Israel to the International Court of Justice.
Yeah.
Yes, that was a bold move. Bold. Many Muslim countries, Indonesia, the world's most populous Muslim country, didn't do it. Iran, that has had a fractious, a bitter relationship with the US, didn't do it.
Yeah.
Pretoria did it. And Pretoria does not have a significant population of Muslims for ideological reasons that go a long way between the ANC and the Palestinian Liberation Front.
Yeah.
And they have paid the price for that. The ambassador was expelled from DC, not for that, because he meddled in America's internal politics. Trump has accused them of all sorts of things, genocide against minority white people, threatened to, impose, all sorts of tariffs on them, and just append long-standing business and trade relationships between DC and Pretoria.
Yeah.
But they're not relenting. Ramaphosa, the president, is asking the AU to designate Israel as a terrorist state.
Correct.
That is his position.
Yeah.
I'm sure like that is live wire. That is live wire. I'm not so sure if it came up for voting.
Yeah.
AU member states will take a vote.
Yeah.
Most likely, majority of them would go for short call or long call when something like that comes up. But that is the voice that I hear. That's the voice both domestically, among us, the intelligentsia, civil society, political elite. They are very vocal and vociferous on this conflict, and as they have been all along. The rest, we are condemning Iran. We are decrying Iran's right to defend itself. We don't ask questions. How do you just, wake up and attack a sovereign state? How do you wake up and decapitate, a government?
Yeah.
You take out their supreme leader, in effect, the head of state.
Yeah.
These are serious crimes in international law, serious crimes. That you can invade a country and take out the president, the prime minister, serious. But we don't want to look at that. We don't want to look at, the schoolgirls who were buried the other day. The first strike by Israel, 165 Iranian girls taken out. No, Iran, why are you defending yourself? Why are you defending yourself? That's the question we are asking Iran.
And
So
what is interesting, Western, if you can hear me, the issue of the main reason why the likes of US, as they put it on public domain, is they want to liberate the people of Iran because of the oppressive system in Iran. And if you're here when we were beginning the conversation, one of the issues we raised was the aspect of trying to purport by eliminating Khamenei and putting in the son, which President Trump wanted to be involved in, is liberating the people of Iran. From your lenses, do you feel this a liberation? Because yes, you opine that it is going against international laws, but then the argument is it's a liberation. Is it for you?
Eli, that's a rhetorical question.
It is.
It's a rhetorical.
I'm just trying to find out that I'm not crazy. So if you and I can agree on this, then I am not. That's what I'm asking.
These are bullies. These are genocidaires. These are the Zionists. Israelis are Zionists. The American state is a criminal syndicate. See, these are not Democrats. These are criminals, actually. And they've been engaged in criminal activities for the longest time. I mean, they began invading countries in 1776 to date. Virtually every year they invade some country. Every year they create some trouble in some part of the world. But going back in that time. So who are you to liberate Iranians? Have you liberated Americans? We saw the other day in Minnesota, some woman being shot dead on the streets, and she was driving away. I mean, you would imagine a sophisticated country, you know the license plates of the vehicle. So it wouldn't be hard to get hold of that woman. Was she shot dead in broad daylight, executed? And then the police justified. She was a threat, I don't know, to them. And you can see the images. She was no threat to anybody. You don't remember George Floyd? Somebody just placed a leg on his neck until he passed on, and the police were there. Nobody interfered. Nobody intervened. That you want to liberate people? You want to liberate people, eh? With that kind of society? No, they are not liberators. What they are doing is they don't brook. If you want to be America's enemy, defy them. And how do you defy them?
Yeah.
You defy their hypocrisy. Defy their hypocrisy. Those things about human rights, democracy, credible elections, power transfer, defy those things, then you'll be the enemy. But buy into those fake narratives, and then it doesn't matter. Like Museveni, you can hold sham elections. You are the ally. You shoot people. You are the ally. You arrest Bobby Wine. You are the ally. You just bought into their fake narratives. But prioritize the well-being of the Ugandan people.
Yeah.
They will come after you.
Yeah.
You won't last. Prioritize the interest of Venezuelans. They'll come after you. Prioritize the interests of Cubans. They'll come after you. Cuba, as we speak now, is being strangled. It's being strangled. The embargoes taking a heavy toll on Cuba as we speak now, courtesy of the US. So you want to liberate Iranians, and you are strangling Cuba and its citizens. You're strangling them, snuffing life out of them. But at the same time, you want to liberate. Okay, tell us, when you went to Iraq to liberate them from Saddam Hussein, how did that go? Tell us, give us. That should be an example of what to follow. We did this. We can also replicate this in Iran. When you went to Libya to liberate Libyans from Gaddafi, tell us how it went. Tell us how it went. When you went to Syria to liberate Syrians from Bashar al-Assad, tell us how it went. Give us those examples. These are not liberators. It's their narrative, by their media and their lackeys around the world. But you and me know that these are not liberators. These are bloodthirsty hounds. So that's what they are.
You know what? Where I came with that question from, it's because, as you said last week, I believe not last week, but on Monday during one of the conversations you're having on the media, I stumbled upon a conversation that was happening, a live broadcast like this, and predominantly speaker after speaker, most of them were in support of the move by the US to go into Iran and invade Iran, because it's an invasion. And to back up their support, the whole conversation was, it's because of how the evil leader in that country has been. And this is the then supreme leader, Khamenei. Today, as we speak, they are still trying to liberate that country. And that's why I feel these conversations are being completely misconstrued to justify illegalities, because there are a lot of them that are happening, crimes against humanity. If we were to objectively understand the aspect of this war, one will argue, because the US themselves told us they have been able to eliminate the army of this country. So who are they fighting, Western?
Well, I'm not so sure whether they have eliminated the
That's what
Iranian
they
army.
said.
Well, it's their propaganda. Remember, war is psychological. Like 80%, 90% of war is psychology. That's what it is. A lot of it's a mind game.
You know why for me it's we can talk about the psychology aspect, Western, and please engage me. It's not because of anything else. I am just going by the book. If you have an enemy that you have completely flattened out and they are on their knees, do you continue bombarding them? Because the American official statement is they've been able to take out the Air Force, the Navy, and the Army at large. And therefore, they have, in quotes, won this war. They have been able to give back this country to the rightful owners who are the Iranians. So then, that's why I'm trying to understand who are they still fighting against? Ama mimi nasoma news opposite.
No. Listen, remember what I said. This is not a war about military prowess or sophistication. It's not. Because if we went there, Iran is no match for the US. It's a no-brainer. So that war is not about military prowess. This war is about other things. I said it's about economics.
Yeah.
This war is about time.
Yeah.
Iran will stretch these people for as long as it takes endurance.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
This war is about geography. Iran is not Iraq. It's not Libya. It's not Afghanistan. This is a massive, massive country with the rugged topography and 85 plus million people. Vast, 1.6 square kilometers in million in land mass. So it's not a small country. It's big. Now, those things come into play even if you have got, sophisticated weaponry, like the US. And they're also militarily no pushover. In drone capacity, Iran has been involved in supplying drone capacity all over the world, including Sudan.
Yeah.
So they're not a small Lilliputian country. They have got some military capacity. Then the weapons are not manufactured expensively like the US. So in terms of cost, they can afford to stretch this war. It costs them a lot less than the US, a lot less. The US defense system costs a lot more than the missiles that the Iranians throw at them. You get? So they can afford to hang in there for quite long. And then, as I said, they don't have to win. They just have to ensure that the Americans don't win this war militarily, conclusively. For that's what they're aiming to do. Then the other factors come into play. You and me, you stretch the war from being Iran on one side against the US and Israel on the other to a global crisis. That is it. Just becomes a global crisis. You and me are feeling the pain. We can no longer be bystanders and neutral. We have AU. You cannot afford to be neutral. You must take a position, or your citizens will pour onto the streets and drive you out of power. Who don't understand geopolitics? How come the cost of living is so expensive? You're not going to explain to them that, this is as a result of war in the Middle East. They push you out of power. So you can't be a bystander. You can't be neutral. The cool heads have to prevail. As to whether that will happen, I don't know. Trump does not listen to anybody. So listen, Eli, you talked about the space or whatever. Look, Eli, for you to understand some of these things, you have to begin from the position of dignity. That's what it means. We begin from the position of security. And therefore, we speak the language of the Americans. Americans, in their foreign policy, it's always about national security. National security is violence and killing people, the things they're doing. America's national security. What does that mean? It's violence.
Yep.
And bombarding people, killing children, bombarding hospitals, journalists, name it, everything and anything in sight. So those who are supporting the US are proceeding from the position of security. The US is under threat. So Iranians they sponsor terrorists. It's a state that sponsors terrorism. So the US have a right to engage in preemptive strikes.
Yeah.
Eli, how can you arrest somebody on mere suspicion that this person is likely to steal? How can you take out somebody on mere suspicion that this person is likely to steal? They have not stolen anything. They have not attacked you. How dare you attack them preemptively? What does that even mean?
But
So
that's
that
the
is
same way their policing unit
problem.
works.
But if you and me were to proceed from the premise that every other human being deserves dignity, then we'll work for a world that, accommodates everyone and everybody. But we proceed from the position that I need security. And when you need security, you have to identify who is a threat to you, who is posing a threat to you. Suddenly you come up with things about, erecting perimeter walls around your compound.
Yeah.
You need the police, if you're a politician, some bodyguards around you. Who wants to harm you? Who wants to harm you? You want 24-hour, surveillance system around your compound. Now, that's violence. That's the language of violence. Suddenly poor people become a threat. I've seen some homeless person around my gate. This person must be plotting to attack me in my property. What's happening? That's the language of violence, the language of the US. So when you speak like that, you arm yourself and you spend so much money in arming yourself and engaging in the latest military technology. Yep. But you have to use it. When you spend so much money in military technology, those things cannot just hang around like toys. You must use them because they cost so much money.
Yep.
And you cannot just use them. You must provoke people to justify using your toys, to justify the amount of money you've spent in coming up with those toys or buying those toys. Are you seeing how vile and cynical this is?
Yeah.
And you have to invent enemies. You have to construct enemies. You have to provoke other people. So I am not surprised that on that space people are talking. Okay, Iran. Do you know why Iran has had a difficult, tempestuous relationship with the US? It goes back to 1979 when the Shah, who was basically a poodle, a puppet of the US, was toppled. The Iranian Revolution was toppled. And they didn't like it because that was their lackey, that was their puppet, toppled. And the Iranian Revolution, this elite came up and they took up the state. The Americans never forgave them. They did not. So it's not about democracy. It's not about human rights. It's not about the Ayatollah is a dictator. It's not about Iran is a sponsor of terrorism. It's that how dare you people get rid of our lackeys? We wanted Iran to be a client state, like those other characters in the region, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain. No, so it was the same thing in Venezuela. When Hugo Chavez came to power in '99, he replaced the Venezuelan elite that did the bidding of the West, the Americans, and they didn't like it. And he said, wait a minute, who is profiteering from our oil? This oil, we must nationalize it for the betterment of the people of Venezuela. His problems started then, didn't they? That's when they started. And they didn't stop when he died. Maduro took off. He had the same ideology. They transferred their hatred from Hugo to Maduro. Hence, Maduro is in Washington, in some jail and some remand there. Why? Not because they were brutalizing Venezuelans. No. How dare you want to commit Venezuelan resources and specifically oil for the betterment of the Venezuelan people. We are not going to allow that. We want access to this oil and dictate how much you can get out of it. Isn't that what it is? So what is this about human rights? Khamenei, I don't know, is killing people. Iran is, oh, you kill school children with the strike. You bombard school children in Gaza and aid workers and hospitals and schools, civilian infrastructure. You're not a terrorist. You are not a terrorist. You are a liberator. Oh, okay. Okay, I hear you. I hear you. So you arrogate to yourself the right, to label. You are a freedom fighter. You are a liberator. Those who are opposed to ideology, they are terrorists. They are dictators. They are autocrats. They are religious fanatics. Religious fanatics, I hear, DC, they are referring to the political elite in Tehran as religious bigots. Have you seen Trump, being prayed for in the Oval Office? They are laying hands on Trump. What is that? That's not religious fanaticism. Eli, these are narratives. They are narratives. It's a clash of narratives. Narratives are jostling, and if you are not alert, you don't pick out what's going on. Khamenei is not worse than Trump or Bibi Netanyahu or whoever came before, the Henry Kissingers of this world, or Winston Churchills of this world. He's no worse. He's not worse than those characters. Is he? Okay, but they're making us think that he's worse. It's barbaric to kill a head of state of another country. That's barbaric. You cannot characterize yourself as civilized, as modern. If you engage in those kind of activities, you're barbaric, just as barbaric as they come. That is it, Eli. So I understand what you're talking about. If I'm not interested in dignifying anybody, then I will celebrate violence. If I care about my security, America's national security, I will be interested in bombarding other people and brutalizing them and crushing them. That's what it is. So I care about myself. I care about my interests. I care about my life. I don't care about anybody else's life. For that is what it is. Tomorrow they'll be telling you about human rights, about democracy, about the UN Charter, about international law. They will just say these things, and then with a straight face, won't they?
And do you think, based on the current occurrence, and I know you need to land, do you see it as the end or the beginning of the end of this conversation we call international law, human rights, and democracy? Because people are waking up to the realization more than ever that it's just a foggy talk based to, try put in place to distract people from actually pursuing their national and their local interest. Western, is this why we have seen the likes of Tanzania going the way they went, with their elections? We have seen Uganda just flexing their muscles, no longer listening to the class prefect. Nobody is paying attention too much to what the international community is saying. When you bring out the issue of the ICC, they will quickly remind you that it cannot be only meant for African presidents and leaders. You can also take in your own leaders before you take us to court. What are you doing about your own local situation? Weston, is it the beginning of the end of this whole thing we call international collaboration on human rights and democracy?
No, it's not the beginning of the end. Those things didn't exist before now. They did not exist. The human rights didn't exist before now. This thing called international law didn't exist before now. Nobody submitted to international humanitarian law before now. Nobody submitted to international human rights law before now. Nobody cared about the UN Charter before now. No one. What Trump does, what sets him apart is that he can afford to shred and pour scorn on those things openly. That's what it is. He can say, to hell with multilateralism, to hell. I've no time for those things. He says it openly, and he does exactly that. His predecessors would bamboozle you with some flowery language and do the complete opposite. So, like Mark Carney that I spoke about at the beginning, they speak like that. So you focus on what they're saying, these nice things. They speak diplomatically, but they hold a big stick and then they use it unapologetically. So, they must be justified to have done what they did. So, no, I said last time, I don't know whether it was on this platform or not, like, we forget about international law. Read US foreign policy. You read US foreign policy. Well, that is what counts. As long as the US remains the preeminent global actor as we speak, focus on the US foreign policy. Less about international law, less about these norms, for they don't count. And when they breach them, there's nothing we can do to them. Zero. We cannot do anything. So it's like domestically. If your constitution is not strong enough to rein in the most powerful, the political elite, then it doesn't really mean anything. Just a mere piece of paper, honestly. If your constitution cannot rein in the most powerful, the moneyed, the people are exercising state power, it's not anything. It doesn't amount to anything. It's not worth the piece of paper on which it's printed. It can't be that your constitution can only rein in mere mortals. But mere mortals have no option. They have no other choice. They can't resist. The police will come and arrest them. So they have no choice. So it can't be. Just look at your country, whether it's Nigeria or Kenya or Uganda. Can your constitution rein in the most powerful? If the answer is no, then you are just living in a country that is lawless, which is not any different from an autocracy. But the language is democracy and rule of law. Then the other question was, what was it? Uganda, Tanzania. Again, it's not now. Let me ask you, for how long has Museveni been around? From 86, count how many US presidents have come and gone has he ever met from 86 to date? And virtually none of them had any issue with him. None of them. So you hear this talk, Africa is gonna relapse into dictatorship and autocracy because of Donald Trump. He doesn't care about. No, Museveni has been around from 86, doing pretty much what he's doing now. None of those American presidents had any issue with him. They didn't. Can you safeguard our interests in Congo? Yes. And we can do business with you. Can you safeguard our interests in the Great Lakes region? Yes, we can do business with you. Whether you break the UN Charter by invading Congo or what, Museveni has gone to Congo, which is also against international law so many times, dispatched troops to Congo. No action, no sanction. Yeah? It's not about Trump. It's that there's a smoke screen about democracy, Eli, that we are sold, and especially citizens in the developing world, and more so in Africa, and more so in Kenya. Democracy, rule of law, credible elections, periodic elections, constitutionalism, name all those high-sounding phraseologies. On closer scrutiny, they are just hollow slogans, frankly speaking. They're very hollow slogans. So Samia Suluhu didn't do what she did because of Trump or anything. Because she understands that's how the world works. She does understand that's how the world works globally. Museveni didn't do what he did the other day against Bobby Wine because of Trump. Because he's been doing that for a donkey years and gotten away with it. Why? Because that's how the world works.
Yeah.
The world that Museveni knows has no room for human rights, and he's right. He's been around the corner for long. The world that he understands, it has no room for democracy. It has got no room for credible elections. It has got no room for rule of law. Name it. All those high-sounding words. He knows it. He can prove to you. But you and me say no. I think this democratic backsliding in Africa. Oh, since when? Since when? So it's not like we will be worse off today than we were yesterday or 10 years ago. It's only that some of us, the scales are falling from the eyes now. For some, they fell off long time ago. They don't have any delusion about human rights and what have you. They know this is power, and it's just raw. What Americans are doing in Iran, the Israelis are doing in Iran, they did in Gaza. That's what power is like, Eli. That's what it is, unfortunately. But it doesn't mean we don't speak up.
Yeah.
When people are mowed down, we will continue speaking up. But it doesn't mean we're naive or we now approach these things from a naive perspective. ICC in Kenya, Ruto is going to go to the ICC. No, Ruto is not going to go to the ICC. He won't go there. It's not going to happen in a donkey years, in your lifetime. That will not happen. Because the ICC is not for international law. Well, that's what they tell you. That ICC is for international law. To rein in war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. Okay, but look around you. What's happening? Aren't those same crimes taking place non-stop? Okay, how many people are at the ICC as a result of the most people have been locked up at the ICC are omena, small fish. Some rebel figures from Congo, Central African Republic, the banana republics. Those are people who are cooling their heels at the ICC.
Yeah.
No, there's no former president at the ICC. There's no sitting president at the ICC. There is none. Okay, you may talk of Slobodan and Milosevic. Well, because it wasn't tried by the ICC. It was tried by a tribunal specifically set up for former Yugoslavia. But again, it was like, how can you do this kind of barbarism in Europe? Like, these things shouldn't be happening in Europe. They can happen in Rwanda, in Kenya, in Congo, not in Europe. This barbarism of genocide and people butchering one another, no, don't do them here. We can go and do them in Gaza. We can go and do them in Iran, in Iraq, in Libya, not here. So we're going to jail you. So Slobodan is not being jailed because of breaking international law.
Yeah.
Because of exposing the West as just as pre-modern as everybody else.
Wow. That was quite a masterclass, as always, Western. And of course, the reality check of the real effect of what is happening from the global front and the effect it will have in your local community. I would love to cue in Marabu, and Marabu is going to take us to the top of the hour as we come to the conclusion of the conversation. Marabu, I hope you can hear me now and you're ready to speak to us. Good evening.
Greetings, Eli and everybody. I hope I'm coming through.
Yes, you are. How are you doing, sir? Welcome.
Well, cool runnings, just chilly weather, being a bit under the weather, but we give thanks and praises always to the Most High. So, Eli, dealing with Trump is like playing chess with a pigeon. Once in a while, he can make a good move, but eventually he's going to destabilize the entire board. And this is more evident from the reasons that he gives for invading Iraq. You cannot pinpoint exactly what reason that he's giving for this atrocious invasion of a sovereign state. At some point, he says that he wants regime change. At some point, he says that he's going after the nuclear enrichment that he said that they had obliterated the other day. At some point, he says that Israel was going to attack, and he knew that if Israel attacked, then Iran was going to attack their assets. At some point, he says that he had a feeling, a hunch, intuition. So it's really very hard. And you can see this by the lack of support from his partners, especially from the Western countries like Britain. When you see Prime Minister stammer and decide not to join America in this escapade. You can also see the Spanish, you can see now the French calling out Trump on his actions against Iran. Nobody is saying that the Iranian regime was perfect. They've had their issues, especially after the embargo that the US put on them, strapping them out of dollars, ensuring that the economy is cash strapped. However, most of the reasons that Trump give for invading Iran are against international rules and norms. And I would like to agree with Western when he says that for Iran, this war is just to sustain. It's not about winning for them because they didn't start it. It's about depleting the enemy's resources. And we've seen this. America spends about 2 billion a day sustaining this war. And you can see that Trump has gone back to Congress to seek for about 54 billion in order to continue with his war. He's gone back to the weapons industrial complex, asking them to produce more weapons because they're using expensive deterrence weapons, while Iran is using very cheap drones. So, as Western said, for Iran, it's just to hold on and keep on fighting. And this is not the first time that we're seeing this. In the 1980 to 1988, we had the Iran-Iraq War, where America funded Iran, funded Saddam Hussein to attack Iran. For 8 years, the Iranians took a barrage of chemical weapons, a concussion of biological weapons, and still came out on top. So they are used to this kind of fighting. And even if you see their infrastructure, the Iranians put themselves, they have been ready preparing for this war. They have underground tunnels. At the moment, most of the people in Tehran are living in bunkers under their homes, bunkers that have been created in the last 40 years, preparing for this fight. So they know that at some point, if they keeping on attacking the US assets in the Middle East, depleting the American resources, they know that the US will succumb. And I've had their ambassador to Turkey today when he was being asked if Iran attacked Turkey, and he said that they did not attack Turkey. But he said that they are not willing to negotiate with America, especially with the fact that Donald Trump says that he wants to be involved in choosing the next leader. Now, if you want to know something about the leadership of Tehran, the Ayatollah, he is like the Pope of the Shia Muslims. When they form the axis of resistance, which is Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran, Tehran, plus Syria, he is like their Pope. He's not just the leader of Iran, he is the leader of all Shia Muslims in the world. So taking him out creates enmity with all Shia Muslims. And remember, this is the second country within that area, starting with Syria, when they took out Assad, an ally of the Russians. And it seems like the more this war goes on, the more it becomes inevitable that sooner or later Russia, China might join into this war, either monetarily or boots on the ground. And like I said, the American-Iranian conflict has been going on for over 40 years. Barack Obama saw it fit to call the Iranians into the negotiation table to negotiate and have them not enrich nuclear for war purposes. These negotiations were going on very well. Then at some point, Trump decided that he was not going to have these negotiations and destroy the negotiation table. So Iranians are saying that they are not going to negotiate with him because he destroyed the previous negotiations. So what is the immediate aim for the United States? Unknown. What is the immediate aim for the Iranians? Is to survive.
Yeah.
Is to ensure that the world knows that there are atrocities that are being carried out in Iran by the American, by the Israelis. And at some point, the world will come and look at the actions of these two countries, first in Palestine, and now in Iran, like Western put so many other countries, Libya, Iraq, Syria, and see this destructive nature of these two countries, especially when it comes to dealing with the Muslim front. And I think sooner or later, the Western world will come in, if not censure America, will pull away from America and create their own axis. And we've started seeing this. The last time that Donald Trump wanted to take Iceland, or was it Greenland, he told the Europeans that he was going to do it regardless of what they thought.
Yeah.
The Europeans told him that they could put their army in Greenland, and that's what stopped Trump. But what is the reason for Trump, for me, when I see it? I think Trump is having a very hard time at home. His popularity is dropping. The last time I saw is at 34 points. He's losing the congressional seats. November primaries are coming up. The Epstein files are the biggest problem for him right now. And if he could get anything to distract people from these files, then we can see that he's going ahead and doing it. I've heard him today say that after Iran, he's going to go for Cuba, another ally of Russia. So I think slowly, Trump is trying to put the world into a war to ensure that he becomes the life president of America, because he can use it as an excuse in future and say that we're not going to hold elections because we are in a war. Because he knows that if he leaves power, at this point, they're going to come after him for Epstein's. Trump has made over $4 billion US since he got into office. Nobody knows how he made it. Trump has made deals with enemies of the United States. So it's not, for me, about America, as somebody would want to say it's America flexing its muscle. At some point in history, we have a tyrant, a leader who's not supposed to hold that position, and is put into that position. And I believe that Americans did that with Trump. They put somebody who they could not control into that leadership. And at the moment, Trump is becoming a liability to America. We can see him with firing the DHS minister, Christine Noem, today.
Yeah.
He's trying to save face. But I think even the MAGA Republic, his own base, are starting to see him as a liability, because he came into office saying that he's not going to fight forever wars. And he has pulled America into forever wars. So eventually, America is a democracy. Sooner or later, we're going to have another president. And right now, I'm seeing Gavin Newsom, the former mayor of New York, of California, is bidding for the seat. So sooner or later, we are going to have a president who is going to bring back that thing which we are saying we have lost: the international relationships, the international laws, and the humanitarian part of America. For now, I think Americans are hunkering down the way Iranians are doing and waiting to see the aftermath of this war. Thank you very much for the time, Ila.
Asante sana, that is Marabu, and quite an interesting perspective and view of what it means in this war. I mean, I've been pensing and just trying to think through the whole of the week as we had different news coming in, people giving different reviews of what should or should not, and I think what for me didn't stand too good or sound too nice to my ears was the issue of having people championing and almost gearing towards what they will call World War III. Weston, is that where we want to be in 2 minutes? Quick one.
Eli, I think that sounds hyperbolic. It does, because Marabu is right. The Chinese, the Russians, specifically, they will, in one way or another, offer Iran some assistance. They will. But China, which is another consequential state, it is if it's not militarily, economically, of course, they are a long game kind of states, civilization, if you like. They are a long game civilization. The Chinese have planned for the next 50, 100 years. And within that duration, they don't see themselves fighting against the US or anybody. There's no war in China's long game strategy. For the simple reason they know the foolishness of fighting. They just know the foolishness of fighting. It just cobbles up your resources for nothing and you just look stupid. So with them, they just want to modernize their state and as much as possible make maximum use of the resources all over the world. So US and Trump, in a way, they're fighting China. You can't access Venezuelan oil. You can't access Iranian oil because these are allies of China. And China could get really oil at a competitive price from these two countries. And they need a lot of energy to really push that behemoth of theirs,
Yeah.
the Chinese state and economy. So they will figure out how to go about it. But I don't think everybody else is as stupid as Trump. Trump is small-minded. No one will join him in that kind of small-mindedness of war and what have you. I don't foresee that happening. No, because it will be foolish. It's not going to work for anybody. They just want America to self-destruct. Stretch yourself, behave the way you behaved over the decades, thinking that the world is still as it was before. Before long, you have receded into oblivion and others are moving forward. So I don't see an all-out war in the Hobbesian sense of the word.
Yeah.
I don't see that. I see pretty much like the Russia-Ukraine war. Those other forces are pushing from behind, and the war is stretches and stretches beyond the imagination of Russia. So this one will also stretch beyond the imagination of the US and specifically Donald Trump. Remember, George Bush talked about shock and awe, a surgical war in Iraq. It wasn't surgical. There's nothing about shock and awe. America was bogged down, and they're still bogged down in that part of the world. A war of occupation. So it's endurance making this. This will be a war of endurance, of tenacity, of staying power. It's not a war of we shooting the target. Who has got the latest, toys? Who has got so much budget for war? It won't be this kind of war. This is an ideological war. The way it was in Afghanistan, the way it was in Vietnam. And ideological wars cannot be won. You can't win those wars. You can't. People are fighting for their sovereignty, for their identity, for the right to be different. And therefore, how do you win that? They have the staying power and tenacity. So I don't see I don't see Trump prevailing. It will wear him down and the entire American society and his allies. And I don't see the likes of China meddling, getting bogged down in this kind of war, because the Chinese elite is suave and sophisticated. They are not as dumb as Donald Trump, so they won't behave like that. Eli, thank you so much.
Interesting. And well, let's find out how that goes out. It will be a very interesting week to watch come next week. Richard, I see you just came onto the call and would love to try wind up in a few. I'll give you the opportunity to quickly give us your thoughts on the issue, even as we try to call it a night. Richard, long time no see. Karibu sana. How are you doing, sir?
Thanks for having me, Eli. I'll just try to be as brief as possible because you're winding down. I think if you're to understand what is happening in Iran right now, we should by all means drop the definition of war as we know it post-World War II. Because if you check how the dynamics shifted and how that war was won, the US was able to build an atomic bomb, was a powerhouse when it came to military capabilities, because they actually turned most of their factories, may they be Ford or most of the industrial complex really, to actually build their capabilities, and that in a way put up deterrence. So the world as it is right now cannot be measured in the lens of World War II, because most people have been saying there's going to be World War III. What's going to be the dynamic? I mean, if you look at Hitler and how he was moving and decided to branch out and offend the rest of Europe, and causing even the US and Russia to be allies at some point to actually fight the German Reich and what was happening there. It's actually a different world right now. So the war in Iran, in essence, and where the United States sits at the moment right now, as it is, I agree with those people who make the assessment that it's a bit volatile, and most of the influence they've had in the world is probably been a bit shaky, and they're trying to figure out how they still have their influence on the world. The Democrats came into power and they said maybe having soft power, US side, and doing this is probably how you keep allies. And I would say Trump has really thought about this problem. I mean, in his mindset, which is very idealistic, by the way, in nature, he's been very consistent about how he wants the US to be, and give it to him. Democracies, as somebody said, presidents will come and go, and they would have their own way of doing things. But one thing that is very clear is this concept Americans have called the American primacy, that whoever comes to office, whatever their politics might be, various arms, may they be the CIA, the Army, the Navy, they're all fighting to make sure that the United States as it is actually prevails, and that's a primary objective. So I'll just try to paint that mindset. They're trying to still maintain that relevance, but if you're still going to define war, or World War III, as people have called it, in the lens of World War II, and who was powerful, and Russia, we actually miss the point. That's why China is actually pushing more on trade. They want to be an economic powerhouse, not number one, a military powerhouse. They want to economically push the US out. And Russia, they have capabilities, by the way. If it's long-range missiles, they actually have them in plenty. But they understand to actually wage war in the 21st century and post that, military might and deterrence is just but one thing. But who pushes the needle on the economic front deserves to start making an argument. And I'll make a very last point. Remember, Keir Starmer recently visited China, and Britain, or the UK as you know it, is actually an ally to the United States. So him visiting China is in a way signaling would this perhaps be the breakthrough because of the economic pressures they're having back at home. One thing I would tell you for sure, the Iran conflict, people have called it war. I don't think it's metamorphosized and transformed to become a war yet. To me, it's a passing cloud that will actually come and go, because to Trump, really, the Iran question has been a 47-year question. and he's that person who always wants to prime himself as, going in first and, doing something about it, championing those interests. And I would say he actually took cues, because the Iranians went on the streets. Whether it was funded by the CIA or not, we don't really know. But one thing is for sure, this regime on the Ayatollah was actually very unpopular back at home. So it actually gave him a bit of confidence. And what he'd done in Venezuela is like, okay, maybe this is the right time. There was intelligence reports, from assessments, and people saying perhaps we don't know how the Iranians would, react. But he did his best and went in and, trouble that war. Whether it's the right thing to do or not would actually tell. People say, Iran has support besides Russia. I mean, the Gulf states are not really for Iran, and they've not been for a very long time. We can maybe organize a space and discuss, Iran, the past Iran as a country, and the Shias. I mean, not the Shias, but the Islamic Republic, and how that changed, and how the Revolutionary Guard, Khomeini, and how they came in and they wanted to actually change the narrative to sort of destabilize that.
Yeah.
So Iran, to me, has always been a loner, and they've always wanted to end up getting that nuclear weapon. Whether they have it or not is something we can discuss another day, because I know we're winding down. It was actually their last thing they had to do.
Yeah.
Those people who said Obama did diplomacy, I don't think he did a good job, to be very honest with you, because he tried the same diplomacy, shook hands with North Korea, and they actually built that nuclear weapon behind their back. So at the end of the day, I think Trump really, in his mind, I think, besides the politics of the one man, the strong man, at the end of the day, I think he's that kind of person who wants to sort of poke holes on the hard problems. Because Biden looked at this Iran issue, left it. Obama shied away from it, but he actually went ahead and handled it head on. So for the guys who are saying maybe Iran would get support from Russia, I don't see Russia and China actually supporting Iran, because they too have their own challenges and problems that they're actually facing, and they understand very well. Much as they want to be at the top of the the power matrix, they actually want a world to be powerful too, or project.
Yeah.
No one wants a World War III where we'll decimate each other and they would not have power to actually, have influence and control over. And I think China understands that. So I agree with Western when he said that they're playing the long game. It's a matter of wait and see. I know I've not made personal opinions. I'm just trying to make sense of it.
Yeah.
One thing I know for sure, Iran could be, putting that charm offensive for the longest time. They've actually done it. I don't think it's anything new. I don't think the US is sitting back and not knowing these guys could prolong these as long as they want. Perhaps if we have a new president coming, maybe that could change. I do not see how that is going to change. Will it lead to a full-scale world war? I do not think so. Eventually, it will stabilize and, things will actually come back to normal. Once the economic sense hits, gas prices go up as they're actually going, a reset would happen one or the other. But one thing I know for sure is Iran, I don't think it would be the same. I won't say it would fall, but it won't be the same. Would not obviously end up in a full World War III. That's definitely not going to happen. And even if it happens, I don't think Iran would be that country that would actually put us there. I'd be more looking at what North Korea, China, and Russia are actually aggressively doing. And those are the three countries to actually watch. Iran was not even a threat to the United States. I think Trump just pushed it up the list and made it a priority, because to him it was like, I need to settle this question and poke holes into the Iran question, even though they had not fully developed the nuclear capability. So I know the space is winding down. So Eli, to answer your question, we're not going ahead for full world war. I don't think that is happening. This is not a war as it is. It's not been yet, because there's not been even ground offensive yet. So I'll still wait. I think the US will wear them out. They would use every other resource and capability. And finally, as a final point, one thing you must remember, the United States has got almost $1 trillion plus US budget. So firing rockets of $50,000 and them spending $1 million to actually put them down is not an issue. If push comes to shove, the US would rather bankroll the economy to actually make sure they fight till the end. So at the end of the day, who has that kind of money to go against that power? Europe has actually backed down most cases, even when Trump has really been, talking tough. So it's a matter of wait and see. To Iran, if they had support of their people, this could have changed the equation. But because they don't, I don't see how they're going to survive. And in reverse, they're the ones who've been asking for the negotiations. It's not the other way around. I don't think they have any leverage besides just being that troublesome person who's throwing tantrums, and that's how it's going to be. But we'll watch and see. I mean, I could speak all till the cows come home, but I'll just leave it at that because of time and give my
Richard,
voice.
did you say the Iranians have been asking for help?
They're the ones who actually requested to negotiate, and Trump said we're not going to negotiate. And once the hard lines were drawn, they were like, okay, we also don't want to negotiate anymore. So they still went on with the strategy.
Because we're concluding.
I don't think the US went ahead and tried to negotiate with them. They did at first.
Yeah.
And that's how Trump does. He calls in the table. He wants a deal done very quickly. They were not ready. He was like, I'm done. And then that's when the epic fury and the lion something happened. Yeah. But once the heat started coming in, they actually requested through back channels, through the agencies to actually, sort of reach some sort of settlement. Yeah. But they were like, it's too late. Yeah.
All right. I have a quick question, Richard, and everyone that is listening. But this one will be answered by Richard. Weston, again, we'd said good night to you, but really, because Richard has tried to destabilize the waters, I would love a very short answer to my question, which is, Richard, you'll go first. Who has the right and no right to have their hands on the nukes? Why do you think the nukes are not safe in the Iranian hands? Or why does the US think so? Richard?
You know what? I would request to actually give you a very, I don't think it's a very easy answer, because it's not even a game of, who's morally right or wrong to actually have nukes.
Yeah, I understand. I understand. And that's why we'll save this for next time. But I just want to get it now from you. From the way you are looking at it, has any of these, parties have the right to say these guys should not have their hands on the nukes?
Well, unfortunately, they do not have the rights to actually get to determine that. But
that's what they're doing.
They actually do. They're doing it. So, I mean, I won't come here and say, one person should say who should have nukes or not. But apparently, we don't live in an ideal world. So there's one person who actually has plenty of those nukes and a couple of adversaries who have those nukes. And because they have the loudest voice and the loudest influence, they're actually dictating who should actually join these clubs of having nuclear weapons or not. Unfortunately, that's the case, but I won't say that it should be up to them to determine who should have them or not.
All right. And there is a comment here by Wajibu who says, Iran is banking on US people's exhaustion. I disagree with him on one thing. I don't know if there's a lie, but it's an opinion. You're welcome to put yours across. Let's go to Weston. Weston, does anyone have the audacity to say the Iranians or whoever should not have nukes, especially coming from the US?
No. The answer is no, because we keep on saying there's no world government. There is no world government. Of course, the US thinks that they are. Look, where we are actually, the only guarantor for your peace are nuclear weapons. Where we are now, if you've got nuclear weapons, that is the only guarantor for your peace. Nothing else. Nothing else. And therefore, you may have capacities in all sorts of areas, but without nuclear weapons, America will do what they are doing against Iran, what they did against Iraq. They will dare not do this to North Korea. They will dare not do that to North Korea. They will dare not do this to China or Russia. No matter how rogue Putin may be, they will not dare do this to Russia. No matter how small the Russian economy is, it's not big. It's a small economy. But when it comes to capacity for violence, they have it. They will not. So if you want sovereignty in the substantive meaning of the concept, you better lay your hands on nuclear weapons. If you don't, tough luck. Then the Americans negotiated in bad faith with the Iranians. Bad faith, Eli. Before they struck together with the Israelis, well, Tehran had made some concessions. That there will be zero stockpiling of weapons, of uranium grade. International Atomic Agency inspectors will come and inspect Iran and see, does it pose a threat to anybody owing to nuclear capability? So these guys here, they just forgot about all that. Pretty much the same way George Bush behaved against Saddam Hussein. Because again, Mohammed al-Baradei, at that time was heading this agency, an Egyptian physicist, went to Baghdad, met Saddam Hussein, inspected Saddam Hussein's, military facilities and, all sorts of things. And the report was clear. He did not have weapons of mass destruction. But George Bush said, we've got our own sources. We've got our own intelligence. It's the same thing. History just repeats itself as a farce. As a farce. So, wait, Iran is the victim here. Because, Eli, the same question about nukes, nuclear weapons. Look, if you are a dictator in your country, it's your people. It's your people. We have got a right to get rid of you. Nobody has got a right to come and kill you or get rid of you or arrest you. Because that kind of approach always escalates into chaos and turmoil. Pretty much what we are seeing in Libya or Iraq. Pretty much. That's what you will have. So it's not within America to impose a leader on Iranians or the Iraqis or Libyans or Kenyans or South Africans or Nigerians. It's not within their right. Let them focus on their own domestic affairs. They're not the police of the world. But we think they are. Hence the consequences we are facing and chaos all over the world. So would you rather you had Muammar Gaddafi in Libya without elections, without political parties, without free press, civil society, but Libya working in quotes as it was? Or you rather have what you have in Libya, effectively a wasteland? The same thing with the Iraq. These are questions we have to ask ourselves, even as we say, Khamenei, the Islamic State in Iran is rogue, is terrifying and terrorizing its citizens. Would you rather have a Libya-like state in Iran? Then what will become of that Middle East? Because there will be a domino effect. If that chaos continues the way it is, there will be a domino effect. That place will not be habitable, even for Israelis. It won't be habitable. The entire region will be engulfed in chaos and utter turmoil. And the energy we rely on that region for, energy, they're big for energy. So all of us will have engaged in self-immolation by supporting Trump and his eccentricities, and Bibi, Netanyahu, the genocider. We're engaged in self-immolation as the world. As in, we're committing suicide.
All right. Wow. Well, that's a tough question with very many answers. Clearly, Richard, you're right to say it cannot be answered in one sentence. Marabu, who has the right to determine who keeps the nukes or not? And what would be your take? A quick one on the same?
So, Eli, in 1961, Russia tested the largest nuclear bomb ever, a 50 megaton bomb named the Tsar. So after this, the countries that own nuclear, there were 9 countries, they came up with a principle called the nuclear umbrella. And under this nuclear umbrella, it was a deterrence to prevent other countries from also trying to own nuclear weapons. They decided that a country that owns nuclear weapons will defend another country that doesn't own nuclear weapons, meaning that this nuclear umbrella prevents any country from using the nuclear bomb. And that's why even if World War III was to break out today, nobody's going to use the nuclear bomb because they saw the destructive nature of a 50-ton nuclear bomb that Russia tested. So it is a treaty by 9 countries, and they decided that only these 9 countries have the right to own nuclear weapons, and no other country is going to be allowed to own nuclear weapons. Whether they were right or wrong on making this declaration, they are the most powerful countries in the world, so they had the right. And that is why Iran is getting into hot waters, because it is trying to get into this nuclear umbrella. Remember, if Iran gets a nuclear bomb, then Israel cannot attack Iran. And that is what Iran is trying to push for. It's not trying to get a nuclear bomb to attack Israel. It's going to be a deterrence because the international laws, the biggest international law, forget about these small ones that we disregard, is about nuclear. And once a country like North Korea has nuclear weapons, then there is no way that you're going to attack it. And that was the aim of Iran, to join this nuclear umbrella. So which country has the right to own nuclear weapons? Is the 9 countries that had nuclear weapons by 1961 when Russia did the testing, and no other country is allowed to join this group. Whether Iran has nuclear weapons at the moment, that one has been confirmed that it does not have. It had 3 years to carry out its program, but it was decimated by the Trump administration. So it's not part of the nuclear umbrella, and that is why it is being attacked. Thank you very much.
All right. Ah, very interesting perspectives there. And we are coming to the end of this conversation. I know I was having more requests coming in to request for the mic. And Wajibu, you're going to do me a difficult one here. I would love for you to really conclude with us this talk. And therefore, for those of you who are just coming in, we really had a great conversation focusing on the war, and we've been told not to call it a war because it's not one yet. That is on the global response to the same. Wajibu, because of time, I'll give you a quick one to quickly just come in, make your quick presentation, and let's be done in the next 5 or so minutes. Wajibu, if you can hear me, kindly pick up the mic and let's do this. Go ahead. Good evening. Wajibu, proceed.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. I am still very new on X. By the way, you see, I have 50 followers. I look like a bot. But anyway, it is what it is. I had Thomas. Where is he?
We don't have Thomas, but just go to your issue that you feel is not correct. Then we can be able to discuss that. Go ahead.
I thought it was Thomas who was on a few minutes when I got in on TikTok. Anyway, thank you so much. I'm not going to take much time, by the way. There's one thing that we are not counting on when we are looking at this issue. I know that Iran may not have the capability to fight with these powers, and especially like right now, even some of the countries in Europe, they are backing them up. They're allowing them to use their bases. They are allowing them to use their defensive whatever airplanes and all that. So they may not be counting on winning the battle on the air. They may not be counting on that. But I am looking at it in a place where they are going to use a symmetrical approach to create pressure people need the most, either in the Middle East or globally. And this is something that we cannot wish away, because right now We can feel the pressure. Even in Kenya as we speak, there's going to be a hike in almost everything. There's going to be an inflation, whether it is because the people who are piled up, they just want to make a little bit more of profit, taking advantage of the situation. But we cannot wish away the shakeup that is going to be happening and has already started economically. If you look at where Iran is stationed, you look at the Strait of Hormuz, you realize that a few countries in the Gulf, the Gulf countries, the GCC countries, 6 of them, they are locked inside. Those people have no water. They only rely on the water from the sea and their desalination plants. If Iran, because they are fighting for survival, they feel this much threatened, they will not fail to bring the entire house down. And there's one way to make sure everybody goes on their knees with just a stroke of one drone, and the entire Middle East will lack water within a day or two. That is number one. Another thing which is happening, it is the global economic chokehold because of the oil and the gas. Strait of Hormuz already controls 20% of the global economy passing through there. That is number one. As much as we cannot see that much raise in prices, because we are just 6 days to the war. If they can drag it and take the heat at home, just drag it a bit, you will see Saudi Arabia will start asking the questions they are asking. UAE. There's one of the tycoon there who asked, who authorized this war? Who did? And they asked Trump live on air. Saudi Arabia, they will be hit, they have been hurt. So they're going to start pushing for some ceasefire, some sort of ceasefire. So when the speaker was saying that these people had been asking for ceasefire, you're listening to this war on the other front. There is the real war that is happening in the Middle East, and there is the propaganda war that has to be won online. So the propaganda war is there. We have to differentiate between them. Trump will say anything. He even called some of them and told them that they should, the ones that want to lead, they should actually find a way to reach out. So the CIA itself, it advertised for Iranians who want to cause chaos within their own country, and gave a process of how they should join and contact the CIA. When you hear these things, the people start questioning and start asking themselves, maybe so and so actually is a mole. He wants to confuse the people inside Iran so that he can create some sort of division. So Iran still has a few cards on their sleeve, and they are waiting patiently, and they are also counting on exhaustion of the interceptors, the intercepting whatever that they are using to intercept the bombs. That's why they are using thousands of drones. Because if you throw one drone, they are using like 4 interceptors. That is exhaustion. They want to finish those ones and then they can hit them hard if they still have the launchers. Another thing that they are counting on, this war is very unpopular in the US. Very unpopular. It has divided the MAGA, and some don't want war. But because the question is, how long are you going to keep us in Iran? Because we don't want another situation like Iraq. How long? And when it drags like this, and they look at the billions of money they are using per day, the taxpayer will not allow it. They will not allow it to become Iraq. They will not allow it to become Vietnam. Actually, Vietnam War was won by the people in the United States. They said, no more. No more. We can't take it. Just come back home. Bring our kids. So this time, they're going to say, you know what? We can take it. We are paying more for it, and we can afford anymore. So those are the few things that probably Iran has on their sleeves and they are counting on. We cannot ignore Iran. That is a country that has been waiting for this moment for so long, because the threats did not start today. The issue of US and Iran started in 1951. And it started because people were angry at BP, a British company that was controlling their oil, was giving them just a little portion of their sales from oil. So when British was not happy, they decided, you know what, we are going to ask for help from the Iran had elections, and they elected Mr. Mohammed Mossadegh. And then this guy, 1 year or 2 years into, in 1951, 2 years into his election, he nationalized the oil. He was a nationalist. He nationalized the oil, and Britain was not happy. It requested for CIA's help. In 1953, they formed a coup, and that coup led the people of Iran to be led by the Shah for 26 years until 1979 under the subjugation of one thing they called Savak. And because US was allies with the Shah, they never complained about how the king subjugated his people using a force that was called Savak. So they were good friends at that point. But then in 1979, students from Iran, they are the ones that formed a coup against the Shah. And that is how Ali Khamenei was brought into it. I don't know whether I'm mentioning his name right. Brought into it. So this enmity now brought up because at that point, US was the enemy. They had already removed a democratically elected prime minister of Iran. That is number one. And now, USA, whenever it is talking about these things, it doesn't talk about how they formed a coup and removed a democratically elected prime minister. They only talk about 1979 when there are 66 people at the embassy were held hostage, and they hold them Iranians accountable for this. That is why they say this issue started 47 years ago, but in real sense, it started in 1951, 52, 53, all the way to now. So Iran has been prepared for this. They may take the heat as long as they can, but they may not allow US to come in because they have been there 26 years. They were there. So these people are they have an experience of US tentacles in their country. And this is a 5,000, between 3,000 years of civilization. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
I don't know what to say. It's a tough topic to handle in one night, but definitely it's not gonna be the last time we are having this. Western, you really don't want us to conclude, really, Western? What is issue? What is issuing you?
You see, the point is this, that you're responsible for your own security as a sovereign state. If you've got sovereignty, because some have it nominally. North Korea, these guys who keep on looking at America in the eye and daring them. Do you know they became a nuclear power in 2006? It's not too long ago. 2006. That's when they became a nuclear power. And they have got the least number of warheads. Those things are counted in terms of warheads. They're the least. They rank below India and Pakistan. They've got only 50. Just 50. So it means even if you've got just 10, no one is going to play games with you. 50. And no, Americans cannot go to Pyongyang and order people around. Of course, Putin is at the top. He dwarfs the US. He's got more warheads than the US. And he's big. And that's why he can do whatever he wants to do. So the point is this. You can have a flag, you can have your national anthem, a coat of arms, police force, military, and what have you. But if you don't have warheads, no. You don't matter within the broader scheme of things. Because Pyongyang defied UN resolutions and what have you, just expelled those international atomic agency people. Those, you just go home. I'm not going to be packed to this thing about how many countries are entitled to nuclear weapon. No, I'm not gonna listen to that. And they went ahead and refused those things about denuclearization. In Africa, for those who don't know, South Africa had nuclear capability before 94. But the thinking was that you can't give these things to black people. So they denuclearized. That's what it is. Before they handed over power to black people. Before then, they had the capacity. So again, these things, look at how they look at them. White people have what it takes, to handle nuclear weapons and capacity. Black people can't. People of color cannot. Well, Indians defied. Pakistan defied. But Americans are at home with India and Pakistan because they don't look at them as threats. They look at them as more like their allies. India is an ally of the US. Pakistan is an ally of the US. The Pakistan military regimes, they have got strong ties with the Americans and those other people. So their nuclear capacity is different from the nuclear capacity of Pyongyang, in as much as India has more, Pakistan has more than Pyongyang, North Korea. Israel, for some bizarre reason, it has less warheads than India and all those other people. They come last, but North Korea. But a lot of violence, all over the place. So Eli, if you're a president of a country, my advice to you is that please look for nuclear capability. Don't listen to those things about who is entitled to. Look, and then will you be respected? Your citizens will be respected. That would be my advice to you tonight. Thank you so much.
When I become president, you will be my Secretary of State for War, as you said it, and we will discuss how to get our hands on the nukes. But that said, ladies and gentlemen, really quite a heavy conversation moving forward. A lot of interesting intrigues in between. There's the economic front, there's the morality aspect, there's the legality issue. There is also what we call and basically refer to as human rights, access to resources, among others. And most important is the fact that all of us are implicated in one way or another. What is the global response to all of this? For those of you who have been celebrating and say it is time we decided to go to World War III, my unsolicited advice will be you cannot wish that on yourself. We are already fighting too many wars. We are fighting the technology catch up. We are fighting the eradication of hunger, and we are fighting our own enemies who we call our elected leaders. And by the way, for those of you who celebrate when you call upon your big brothers in the name of we want justice, we want to go to The Hague, we want, America should come in, you can see what the global community is doing. Our solutions should be homemade. Like you treat flu, that is how we should treat our issues. Home remedy. Unfortunately, I can't take more speakers. We must call it a night. For those of you who will be continuing to tune in, we continue this broadcast live on our X platform. That is the broadcast session. And our YouTube channel will also be coming to an end of the broadcast. But we remain live on kotfm.co.ke. Continue listening in as I take you through the night all the way to midnight. My name once again is Lukian Eli.
KOT, is it this one? No?
Yes, we are live on KOT, that is kotfm.co.ke, and you can watch this broadcast live on our Mizani 254 streaming platform, that is at Mizani 254 here on X. For now, I must hand over to the next session as we conclude our Friday briefing right here, KOT FM, where music lives.
Email marketing@courtfm.co.ke or call us on 0714 308 277. Court FM. Let the music play. You're listening to Court FM. Let the music play.